My wife, Sophia, got poisoned from drinking at her first love's wedding. The doctor managed to pull her back from the brink of death with great difficulty. But when I scolded her first love a few words, she lashed out at me. At that moment, I finally became completely desperate about this self-moving marriage and proposed a divorce. My wife just looked at me with contempt and said, "Do you think you're still the rich second generation you used to be? Tone down your temper." But when she was discharged from the hospital, she found that my things were already gone from home. Let's start the story. If you like it, remember to subscribe. After receiving the call that Sophia was alcohol poisoned, I rushed to the hospital without hesitation. By the time I arrived at the hospital, she was already out of danger. When the doctor learned my identity, he couldn't help complaining to me, knowing that she's allergic to alcohol. As her husband, why didn't you stop her? Fortunately, she's been saved. A little later, it would have been hard to say. I hung my head and smiled bitterly in my heart. I couldn't very well say that my wife attended her first love's wedding and drank so much because of her distress. Although I've been used to being silent in front of Sophia over the years, after all, I'm a man and I still want to save a bit of face outside. After scolding me a few words, the doctor told me to take good care of Sophia, and I repeatedly agreed. As soon as I entered the ward, I saw David sitting by the bedside, looking at Sophia with extremely affectionate eyes. Back then, the two of them were like a perfect match. If I hadn't intervened back then, they might have already gotten married. Nevertheless, Sophia was my wife after all. I walked up to him and said softly to David, "I'll take care of Sophia here. Today is your wedding day. You should be concerned about your new wife." David finally looked up at me. That face, which I had hated years ago, was still as annoying as ever. With a deep, feeling expression, David said, "I'm fine. After all, Sophia drank like this at my wedding. It's only reasonable that I should stay." I interrupted David and said with a serious expression, "You knew she was allergic to alcohol. How could you just watch her drink like that? Is it satisfying for you to see someone else's wife sad and suffering because of you?" Since learning that Sophia was going to attend David's wedding alone, the depression and annoyance that had been pent up in my heart finally erupted like a volcano at this moment. But before David could respond to me, I heard a weak female voice from behind, "James, what are you doing here? Who allowed you to talk to David like this? Who do you think you are?" The first words my wife Sophia said after waking up were to accuse me of hurting her first love, who was the apple of her eye. At this moment, I didn't feel angry, just a bit ridiculous. David immediately took Sophia's hand, soothing her emotions, and said gently to her, "Sophia, this is indeed my fault. If I could have stopped you, you wouldn't have ended up like this." Sophia responded with a shy face, "I drank on my own. It has nothing to do with you." Their eyes met in the air, and even a fool could tell the affection in their eyes. I suddenly remembered when Sophia and I got married. There were so many guests. I was overjoyed to marry the woman I loved and drank myself into a stupor. But Sophia used her alcohol allergy as an excuse, not only didn't drink a single drop, but also later used the excuse that she couldn't stand the smell of alcohol on me and forbade me from entering the bridal chamber. After getting married, Sophia wanted to start her own business, and I wholeheartedly supported her. In the initial stage of starting a business, there were inevitable dinners. I was worried that she would be deceived or taken advantage of, so I followed her every time. I drank the wine she couldn't drink, and I said the words she couldn't say. The James family back then was different from what it is now. Everyone gave me some face. With my protection, Sophia's company has been going smoothly from the beginning until now. Now, Sophia no longer needs to wine and dine clients, and naturally, I'm no longer useful. I never knew that my wife, Sophia, could drink so well. I thought about it and chuckled. Sophia looked at me with disgust and asked, "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at myself for misjudging people. After 3 years of marriage, it's only now that I realize that everything I've done is in vain." But Sophia didn't need to know all this. Looking at her, I said, "Sophia, let's get a divorce." Sophia seemed not to react to what I said at once. "What did you say?" I calmly looked into her eyes and repeated, I said, "Let's get a divorce." This time, Sophia heard clearly. She laughed out loud, and her eyes looking at me became even more disdainful. "James, do you still think you're the rich second generation from before? Tone down your temper. I don't need to humor you now." That's right. Sophia is now a famous female entrepreneur, while our James family has been in decline since 2 years ago. Now it seems that our statuses have completely reversed. But this wouldn't affect my decision.
I didn't say anything and still quietly looked into Sophia's eyes. Sophia seemed to understand that I wasn't joking.
The smile on her face disappeared instantly, and her expression became solemn.
James, are you serious?
David tried to mediate between us, saying softly to comfort Sophia, Sophia, James is just angry because of your illness.
How could he divorce you?
Back then, what Sophia liked most about David was his gentle appearance, which I could never learn in my life.
I looked at David and impatiently replied, do I know you well? The smile on David's face froze. Hearing my tone, Sophia's face immediately fell. James, do you really think you're still the same as before?
Of course, I knew I was different from before, but this wasn't a reason for Sophia to insult me wantonly. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and the scene of first seeing Sophia came to my mind. At that time, I was only 20 years old, full of youthful spirit, driving the sports car my dad had just bought me, unrestrained.
But my eyes couldn't help but be attracted by Sophia in a dress under the tree.
I continued seriously, Sophia, I admit that you're very outstanding and amazing now. But back then, you agreed to be with me.
I didn't force you.
You married me because you nodded and agreed yourself. There's no need to always act like you were forced to compromise.
I once loved you.
That was true at that time, and now I really want to divorce you, which is also true.
From beginning to end, my tone didn't change at all. Human feelings are limited. When the feelings are exhausted, there's no need to continue this relationship. I turned around and left.
Behind me, there came Sophia's angry roars and David's soft whispers to comfort her, but none of this mattered to me anymore.
I went home at night to pack my things and left. By the time I got to my parents' house, it was already late at night. My mom opened the door for me in her coat. Seeing me, she was full of surprise in her eyes. James, why are you back at this time? Isn't Sophia with you? I didn't say anything, but the moment she met my eyes, she understood everything. My mom patted me on the shoulder and led me into the house. At 12 o'clock at night, our whole family sat on the sofa. After hearing my decision to divorce Sophia, my parents were silent for a while. I was a bit nervous, afraid that they wouldn't support me. After all, marrying Sophia was my own decision back then, and now our family's situation is much worse than before. Divorce at this time would bring me no benefits. But when my dad heard my idea of getting a divorce, instead of getting angry, he laughed a few times, gave me a thumbs up, and said happily, after waiting for so long, you've finally come to your senses. I said my son couldn't be a love-struck fool for a lifetime. My mom sat beside him, also with a faint smile on her face. I was a bit confused. Then I saw my dad sneakily sit next to me and put his arm around my shoulder. He lowered his voice, looking worried about being overheard. Son, don't say Dad doesn't share good news with you. Our family is going to make a fortune. Some time ago, your mom and I took a huge risk and bought a piece of land. Guess what? There's oil under that land. I felt my mind go blank. Everything happened so fast that I was caught off guard. I asked in disbelief, really? My dad patted his chest and said proudly, would I lie to you? Well, you stay at home these days. Dad will give you some lessons. In the future, the family business will be yours to inherit. As for Sophia, since she doesn't know how to be grateful, there's no need to contact her anymore. If it were before, I would definitely resist my dad's offer to give me lessons. After all, at that time, I was just a rich second generation who knew nothing. But now, after experiencing what happened with Sophia, I realized how important ability is. So instead of refusing, I seriously agreed. But I didn't expect that Sophia would come to our house the next day. When I went downstairs, I saw Sophia sitting on the sofa with a gloomy face. She looked at her phone from time to time, as if she was in a hurry. My mom was sitting opposite her, sipping black tea. As soon as Sophia saw me, she frowned and ordered, James, what on earth are you doing? Come back with me immediately today. I walked up to her, my eyes unchanged, and replied lightly, I've already said that I want to divorce you. Divorce? James, do you think the James family can still survive because of whom? Aren't you afraid that the James family will go bankrupt if you divorce me now? Sophia said some really harsh words. Even though I'd been used to her insults over the years, I still couldn't help frowning when I heard such words. My mom put down the teacup in her hand. The smile on her face was still as elegant as ever, but her eyes looking at Sophia were extremely cold. Sophia, that's not right. Your support for the James family is just to repay the kindness James showed you back then. When you married James, you nodded and agreed willingly, didn't you? Why act so high and mighty and condescending now? Sophia's lips were tightly pressed together. Her forced compromise back then was a lifetime humiliation to her. Sophia took a deep breath. Fine, James. I agree to the divorce, but I have one condition. 3 days later is my mom's birthday, and you must be there. I nodded and replied, okay. With Sophia's agreement, the divorce process was extremely smooth.
I didn't take anything that belonged to Sophia, just a small apartment. This was my premarital property, which I bought when I just graduated from college to make it convenient to pick up and drop off Sophia for work. I thought she wouldn't care about such a small house now. After going through the divorce formalities with Sophia, I stayed at home and received tutoring from my dad. Occasionally, I would go to the company with him to get to know some people. The news that the company had found oil was not made public for the time being. As my dad said, everything should be kept low-key until we're sure we can make a beautiful comeback. 3 days later, Sophia's car stopped in front of our house. The car window slowly rolled down, revealing Sophia's face with exquisite makeup. Get in the car. Sophia's tone was flat, and the way she looked at me was like looking at a stranger. Even though I had already expected that Sophia wouldn't have the slightest bit of nostalgia for me, when it really happened in front of my eyes, my heart still felt a dull pain. During the whole journey, Sophia didn't talk to me. Instead, she kept holding her phone, and occasionally a faint smile would appear on her face. I didn't need to guess to know that she must be chatting with David. There were many guests at Sophia's mom's birthday party. When Sophia and I walked in side by side, I could feel the gazes of the guests around me falling on me, some with pity, some with mockery. Now that the James family had lost its power, many people wanted to see me make a fool of myself. Fortunately, I had already learned to remain calm under such gazes. David was standing beside Sophia's mom, chatting and laughing with her. Mom! Sophia's mom looked over when she heard the voice. The moment her eyes met mine, the smile on her lips disappeared instantly. Why did you bring him here? Sophia smiled and presented her gift. After all, it's your birthday. With so many guests, it's not good to be laughed at. I knew the real reason Sophia brought me here. She just wanted to use my last bit of value. Recently, her company had been unable to secure a project. The boss of the other company was a good friend of my dad. Sophia must have sent him an invitation. She brought me here today just to ask me for help. Her calculations were good, but I wouldn't let her get what she wanted. Sophia's mom pursed her lips when she heard what Sophia said. Although her eyes still showed some dislike, at least her expression improved a bit. She stretched out her hand to me and asked me matter-of-factly, "Where's my gift?" Just like when she was lying in the hospital bed, using my money for treatment and asking me to let Sophia go. I smiled, shrugged, and replied, "I don't have one." After falling in love with Sophia at first sight in my freshman year, I launched a fierce pursuit of her. I not only queued up every day to buy her favorite breakfast but also sent her a bouquet of roses after class. But she never gave me a good look. She threw the roses on the ground, gave the breakfast to her classmates, and never agreed to my weekend dates. Until Sophia's mom was seriously ill and hospitalized, and she couldn't afford the medical expenses. Sophia, who was always arrogant, lowered her noble head in front of me for the first time. She begged me to save her mom, and I agreed. I also made a request. But I didn't ask Sophia to be my girlfriend. I just hoped she would give me a chance to pursue her without prejudice, like everyone else. Sophia didn't refuse me. Since then, I covered all the expenses for her mother's treatment, found the best doctors for her, and used all the resources at my disposal, just hoping her mother would recover. In the second year of pursuing Sophia, she came to me again. This time, she hoped I could sponsor her childhood friend, who grew up with her, to study abroad. That person was David. I agreed, and then carefully asked her if we were in a relationship now. After frowning and thinking for a while, Sophia nodded to me. That was the second happiest day of my life. The happiest day was when I proposed successfully. At that time, Sophia's mom's illness had been cured, and Sophia had graduated and found a good job. She proposed that she wanted to start a business, and I was the first to support her. Then I took out the first sum of money to support her with practical actions. The night Sophia successfully negotiated her first project, I proposed to her under the influence of alcohol, and she agreed to me. But later I found out that what I thought was love growing over time was just me threatening her with my kindness in Sophia's eyes. Sophia's mom's eyes widened as big as bells when she heard my words. She asked in disbelief, "No? James, today is my birthday.
Is there anyone who comes to his mother-in-law's birthday party empty-handed like you? Sophia's mom had a loud voice. For a moment, the eyes of everyone around fell on me. I could hear their whispers, saying that the James family was really not as good as it used to be, and that I couldn't even afford to buy a birthday gift for my mother-in-law. Some people said that a lean camel is still bigger than a horse, and that I was deliberately trying to embarrass Sophia. More people were predicting whether I would make Sophia angry and end up crying and begging for forgiveness on the spot. David was calming Sophia's mom's emotions while earnestly saying to me, "James, are you still arguing with Sophia because of what happened at my wedding? She was just too happy to see me get married, so she had a few more drinks. There's really nothing between us. If Sophia and I really had an affair, we would have gotten together in college. It couldn't be like this now." I directly interrupted him, "Shut up, you male green tea." I had disliked David for a long time. It was just that I thought our family was in decline before, so I couldn't stand up straight. Now that I knew the real situation of my family, I couldn't bear David's nonsense anymore. As soon as I finished speaking, the expressions of David and Sophia immediately changed. Sophia angrily rebuked, "James, what are you talking about?" But I ignored her and continued, "You said you would have gotten together in college. Do you really want me to expose the truth? The two of you just disliked each other for being poor. You liked each other but looked down on each other. So Sophia found me a sucker. After you went abroad, you deceived that innocent young lady. You enjoy our efforts while playing this first love drama here. Who are you trying to disgust? Do you really think we're all fools and can't see through it?" Before I could finish speaking, Sophia slapped me directly, looking extremely angry as if her secret had been exposed. She said angrily, "James, if you're crazy, go see a doctor. Don't act like this here." She lowered her voice, with a bit of threat. I pushed the soft flesh in my mouth with my tongue, turned my head to look at Sophia, and said, "I don't like her anymore. Who does Sophia think she is?" Slap. I slapped her back and continued, "I'm returning this to you. If you're crazy, go die." Sophia's face immediately turned red and swollen. She looked at me in disbelief. No wonder, after all, I had never said a harsh word to her, let alone hit her, during the long time we were together. "James, are you crazy? How dare you hit my daughter?" Sophia's mother shrieked and immediately stepped in front of Sophia. Sophia's mother was dressed expensively. The large gold bracelet on her wrist seemed to be the gift I gave her after Sophia and I decided to get married. The emerald ring was also bought by my family. Except for her clothes, everything she wore was paid for with my money. I thought that perhaps I had been too much of a doormat to Sophia before, which made them spend my money and act so recklessly in front of me. I sneered and said, "I must be really crazy to have spent millions on your medical treatment back then, only to end up saving an ungrateful wretch." Sophia's mother's face darkened. Sophia reached out to pull her behind herself, then tried to grab me, saying in an unfriendly tone, "James, does it make any sense to say these things now?" She lowered her voice, obviously not wanting others to know about her most embarrassing moments in the past. But I just didn't want her to have her way. I stepped back, avoiding Sophia's touch, and shouted, "Sophia, what's wrong? You were so arrogant when you were spending my money back then, but now you don't want to admit it? James, today is Auntie's birthday." Saying these things, David tried to mediate again. I gave him a look, and he immediately shut up. I hadn't even had the chance to scold him, but if he was so eager to get rebuked, he couldn't blame me. "David, you still dare to step forward? How does it feel to study abroad with my money? I thought you and Sophia were good friends back then. Turns out, you two are up to no good behind my back. It's bad enough that Sophia was sent to the hospital after drinking at your wedding, and you left your new wife to take care of her in the hospital all night. David, your relationship is really as good as ever. When Sophia and I got married, you couldn't come back in time, but you talked to her on the phone for 3 hours at night. Did you think I didn't know? Were you lamenting that you were forced to part, or talking about getting back together in the next life? If you can't let go so much, why not remain single for her for the rest of your life?" David's face turned deathly pale at my words. He had returned from studying abroad and married a wife from a good family. His future should have been smooth sailing. But when I exposed these under-the-table things, he might not be able to live as freely as before. The whispering of the crowd grew louder. This time, it was obvious that they were no longer talking about me. Sophia's mother pointed at me with a trembling finger, her chest heaving violently.
She seemed on the verge of fainting with her eyes rolling back. Sophia immediately reached out to support her, shouting hysterically for the security guards. "Where are the security guards? Security guards! Drag this lunatic out for me!" Sophia's eyes were filled with hatred for me. Two security guards in uniforms immediately came over and were about to lay hands on me. I distanced myself from them, straightened my clothes, and said, "No need. I can leave on my own." "Auntie, then I wish you a long life and an early death." Seeing that she was about to pass out from anger, I finally felt a bit better about the pent-up frustration in my heart. But just as I was about to turn and leave, I heard a familiar male voice, "Yo, it's so lively here. Am I late?" A man in a black suit walked in from the door. Sophia, whose face had been as dark as the bottom of a pot just now, immediately put on a smile when she saw him. "Mark, you're here." Sophia immediately let go of her mother's hand and walked towards Mark, her tone extremely obsequious. I immediately realized that this was the difficult to deal with client Sophia had mentioned. But Mark didn't pay attention to her. Instead, he strode up to me, smiled, and patted me on the shoulder, saying, "You're James, right? You've grown so much in a blink of an eye." I was a bit confused. I didn't seem to remember this face. Seeing that I couldn't recall, Mark continued, "It has been many years since we last met. When you were in junior high school, you climbed a tree in my yard and fell, breaking your leg. Remember now?" The vague memory gradually became clear, and I finally matched the face to the name. "Uncle Mark, it's you. I remember now." I suddenly understood. He laughed so hard that his eyes almost disappeared. "I got a good scolding from your dad that time, and he also took a bottle of red wine from my house. Your dad doesn't have many hobbies, but he likes to have a drink or two when he's free." Hearing Uncle Mark say this, I scratched my head in embarrassment. Seeing that we were chatting happily, Sophia naturally didn't want to be left behind. She immediately squeezed between us and said, "Mark, thank you so much for coming to my mom's birthday party specially." "Not really. Mainly, I heard from James's father that James got married and wanted to see what his wife looked like. My daughter has been saying since she was a kid that she wants to marry James." Uncle Mark said, looking Sophia up and down, and asked curiously, "Is this your wife?" Sophia was about to respond when I interrupted, "She was my wife. We're divorced." Sophia's words got stuck in her throat. She turned her head and gave me a fierce glare. Mark laughed happily. "Divorced is good. Then my daughter still has a chance." I remembered Mark's daughter as a little girl with 2 braids. Later, Mark's family immigrated, and I hadn't seen her for a long time. Hearing his teasing, my smile became a bit awkward. With Mark's appearance, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly became lively. Everyone wanted to make an impression on him and be remembered. The matter of me being kicked out by the security guards naturally came to nothing. Sophia couldn't find an opportunity to talk to Mark about the project for the time being, so she pulled me aside and said in a deep voice, "James, what on earth do you mean?" I knew she was referring to my announcement of our divorce. I said triumphantly, "What? Is it wrong to tell the truth?" She was about to scold me again, but thinking about my relationship with Mark, she forced herself to hold back. Sophia took a deep breath and said, "James, I know you're still angry about David's wedding. I've explained it. It was just an accident. Although we're divorced, we can part amicably. Look, if I can close this project, I'll give you 30% of the profit. How about that?" I looked at her like she was a fool. You know, if this deal could be closed, it would mostly be my credit. But Sophia actually thought she could send me away with just 30% of the profit. Did she think I was crazy, or was she the one who was crazy? Sorry, Sophia. I don't need the money. You can find someone else to cooperate with. After saying that, I turned to leave. But Sophia obviously didn't plan to let me go so easily. She looked at me with disgust and said, "Don't need the money? James, do you still think you're the rich second generation from before? The James family is in decline now. If it weren't for me, do you think you could have lasted until now? Our positions have long been reversed. Who allowed you to talk to me in this tone?" Sophia's voice was full of sarcasm, and her expression was distorted, looking no different from a demon. Just as I was about to retort, Mark suddenly called me, "James, I'll come to your place for dinner in a few days. You have to ask your father to teach me his successful experience. I'm really curious. How come someone can find oil just by buying a piece of land casually?" As soon as Uncle Mark finished speaking, everyone in the room fell into an eerie silence. Especially Sophia, whose pupils suddenly contracted, looking at me in horror. I smiled and said, "No need to wait a few days. We can do it today." "Great. I'm going to drink all the wine in your house." Mark laughed a few times and turned to walk outside. I followed closely behind, but Sophia grabbed my wrist. "James, is what Mark said true? Did your family really find oil?" Sophia's tone lost its previous arrogance, and the end of her voice even trembled a little. I pulled my hand out, looked into Sophia's eyes, and said word by word, "Whether it's true or not, what does it have to do with you?" Actually, I could probably understand Sophia's thoughts. She thought I was rich, and our statuses were never equal from the beginning. Accepting my help for a long time had distorted Sophia's thinking. That's why she treated me so badly after she became successful in her business. She wanted to regain her self-esteem in this way, but she forgot that from the beginning, I fell in love with the pennilesser. My dad was extremely happy to see Mark, and the two of them talked until late at night. After hearing about my situation with Sophia, Mark was so angry that he slapped his thigh. He said Sophia had no vision and thus missed me. He also said his daughter had returned to the country with him and asked me to take her around someday. I just thought Mark was talking nonsense after drinking, so I didn't take it to heart. The next day, my dad announced that the company had discovered oil. Overnight, all those uncles and elder men who had kicked us when we were down came swarming back like bees seeing flowers. All the company's businesses started running again, and countless companies wanted to cooperate with us. My dad was so busy that his feet didn't touch the ground, and even I was dragged to the company to help. When Sophia came to see me, I had just finished a meeting and was too tired to even lift my arm. The secretary knocked on the door and said, "Boss, there's someone outside to see you." I said wearily, "Let her in." Sophia followed the secretary into my office. It had only been a few days since we last saw each other, but Sophia looked much more haggard. Most likely, those fickle businessmen had given her a hard time recently. It was understandable. After all, everyone saw the confrontation between Sophia and me at her mom's birthday party. Now that the James family was prosperous again, they would surely re-evaluate the situation and decide who to cooperate with. Sophia's recent days must have been tough. I looked at her and asked in confusion, "What are you doing here? Didn't we already get divorced?" There were deep dark circles under Sophia's eyes, and she was no longer as high-spirited as before. "James, I was wrong about what happened before. The company's funds are almost running out. Can you help me?" Sophia lowered her stance so much that for a moment, it seemed like I was back in college when she begged me to give her money for her mom's treatment. But back then, I felt pity when I saw Sophia like this. Now, I felt nothing. If anything, it was probably a bit of schadenfreude. Without even looking up, I directly refused. "Sophia, do you think I'm a philanthropist? I'm a businessman. Investing in you brings me no benefits." She got anxious and said to me pitifully, "James, do we have to talk like this?" I finally put down the pen in my hand, looked up at her, and said, "Sophia, if we're talking about our past relationship, then I'm even less likely to invest. After all, our past relationship is only filled with disgust and hatred, not a single bit of warmth." I had a smile on my face, watching with interest as Sophia's face gradually turned pale. Just then, the office door was gently knocked, and Olivia in a Chanel suit appeared at the door. She smiled brightly, her eyes falling on Sophia, and asked in confusion, "Am I interrupting you?" I replied happily, "No, the timing is perfect. I promised Uncle Mark that I'd accompany you to the art exhibition today." Immediately, I stood up and said, "Sophia, I have a date, so I won't see you out." Sophia looked lost when she left. Olivia took my arm and whispered in my ear, "Your taste is really bad." I shrugged non-committally. I thought that after I had said all that, Sophia wouldn't have the face to come to me again. But unexpectedly, her beloved first love actually came to beg me. David suddenly stood up and bowed deeply to me. I was so startled by his action that I almost spilled coffee on myself. "David, what are you doing?" He looked up at me, his eyes full of apology. "I know you divorced Sophia because of me. I really haven't been able to let go of her for all these years. But seeing her so stressed out because of the company, I realized I was being too selfish. I promise I won't have any more contact with Sophia in the future. James, can you please help her?" Looking at David's self-righteous deep affection, I found it a bit funny. Why did both he and Sophia think there was still room for maneuver in our relationship? "David, I think you're misunderstanding. You were the trigger for my divorce from Sophia, but not the ultimate reason.
You should know me.
I could use all means to pursue Sophia back then because I loved her.
Now I'm divorcing her just because I don't love her anymore.
I calmly stirred the coffee in front of me, ignoring David's face, which turned ugly in an instant. After getting married to Sophia, I was once immersed in the joy of getting the woman I loved. But I soon found out that although Sophia agreed to be with me, I never had a place in her heart. I originally thought that life was so long that one day I could completely win her over. But I forgot that love is never something that can be obtained through effort. So I got tired, didn't want to love anymore, and that's just it. The coffee is cold. It won't taste good if you drink it now. I won't finance Sophia, not because of our personal relationship, but purely because there's no reason for me to invest in this company, that's all. After saying that, I stood up and walked out of the coffee shop.
Sophia isn't a very talented businesswoman.
If she were, she should have continued to maintain a fake marriage with me instead of being so impulsive.
She's too easily proud and too quick to show her emotions.
Such a person can't go far in the business world.
My phone vibrated. It was Olivia inviting me to watch a movie at night, and I agreed.
Since that day, neither Sophia nor David has appeared in my life again. Sophia's company is still barely hanging on, but I heard that David divorced his wife. Of course, it wasn't him who proposed. His wife was a pampered young lady.
How could she allow another woman to be in her husband's heart?
I heard that after the divorce, David was severely taught a lesson by his ex-father-in-law. When I went to the hospital for a routine physical examination, I saw David, who was hospitalized. Through the glass, he was lying alone on the hospital bed with a cast on his leg, looking very pitiful.
Sophia wasn't with him.
Presumably, she cared more about her career than love. The next time I heard news about Sophia was on the WeChat Moments, a social media feature in China, can be translated as moments here.
A mutual friend of ours reposted a fundraising link. Sophia's mother had fallen ill again.
The cost of this surgery and treatment was even higher, and she couldn't afford it, so she had to choose crowdfunding.
Out of a sense of acquaintance, I sponsored 100 yuan as a token.
Olivia leaned on my shoulder from behind and teased, "You're spending money on your ex-wife again, you affectionate man." I smiled, put down my phone, and pinched her face, saying, "Excuse me, when can I get rid of the nickname affectionate man?" Olivia replied playfully, "I don't know. For some people, their ex is just a part of the past, for others, their ex is like a criminal record.
Unfortunately, you happen to be the latter."
Olivia grew up abroad and was full of mischief. She laughed and dodged my tickling.
The doorbell of the villa rang. It was the takeout she ordered. But when I opened the door, I was stunned. The one delivering the takeout was none other than David. When he saw me, a bitter smile appeared on his face. It turned out that David and Sophia had gotten married not long ago. Because of Sophia's mother's illness, even though David had a well-paid job, he still had to deliver takeout after work to make ends meet. The heavy financial pressure made him look much older. I sighed with pity and gave him a bottle of mineral water as consolation. The day I saw Sophia again, I had just finished looking at wedding dresses with Olivia. As we walked out of the mall, we heard the voices of a man and a woman arguing not far away. I was very familiar with Sophia's voice. When I turned to look, I happened to see the look of disgust and disdain on her face. "If you weren't so useless, why would I need to humble myself and beg others? David, can't you learn from James? Are you going to work for others for the rest of your life?"
Sophia's voice was loud. David, who was standing opposite her, didn't look good either.
Hearing my name, I awkwardly touched my nose.
Olivia, however, didn't care at all. She bumped my shoulder and said to me with a smile, "How do you feel when you see your ex-girlfriend still hung up on you?" I replied helplessly, "Don't make fun of me." I didn't plan to greet Sophia and David in this situation. I took Olivia's hand and was about to leave. But unfortunately, at that moment, Sophia seemed to sense something and turned around. The moment our eyes met, she was stunned for a moment and then said distractedly, "James, what a coincidence." I nodded politely and saw a flash of embarrassment in David's eyes. "Anyway, it's embarrassing to be seen in a sorry state by someone you once considered a loser."
"You."
Sophia was about to say something more when her eyes landed on the hands that Olivia and I were tightly holding. The glimmer of hope in her eyes instantly dimmed. I was being especially considerate and smiled at Sophia, saying, "Olivia and I are getting married in a month.
If you two have the time, you can come to the wedding." Sophia's face turned deathly pale in an instant. Perhaps in her opinion, I should have been pining for her. But life is so long, and everyone is just a passer-by. Before leaving, I didn't forget to advise Sophia, if the company really has no hope of turning things around, you should let it go early. After all, you're really not cut out to be a boss. Ignoring Sophia's unpleasant expression, I took Olivia's hand and walked away briskly. The fundraising didn't help Sophia much. In desperation, she chose to sell the company. Coincidentally, I was the one who took it over. Since Olivia was bored at home, I decided to buy a company to give her something to do. On the day of signing the transfer agreement, Sophia's face looked extremely ugly as soon as she saw me. Just before leaving, she suddenly stood up, and the chair made a harsh screeching sound against the floor. "James, is there still a chance for us?" she asked. I smiled and replied, "Sophia, this company is a toy I'm giving to my girlfriend. I hope you won't spoil her good mood." Sophia seemed on the verge of collapse and fell back into the chair. Unfortunately, no matter how hard she tried, Sophia's mother still didn't make it through. On the day Olivia and I got married, we invited many guests. I saw Sophia, heavily made up, standing next to a boss. Her made-up face still looked haggard. An old classmate told me that she had divorced David. Their relationship couldn't withstand the financial strain of having no money. David disappeared, and Sophia became the kind of vain woman she used to dislike the most. I led Olivia forward to offer a toast and smiled, saying, "Sophia, you have good taste, but the poor are still the poor after all. You can change your appearance, but not your inner self." Behind me came Sophia's curses, but I didn't turn back. I knew that we had always been on different paths.